Jiang and Jiyu Kaishan were flying on the sword. Our boy's mind was filled with questions and curiosity. He extended his hands and asked if he could practice the techniques of all the races of heaven. Jiyu Kaishan crossed his arms, began to gaze toward the ground, and replied that this was a question even he could not answer since many had tried to take this path. But almost no one had managed to succeed because the techniques practiced were in conflict with the heavenly Tao. The master revealed that Ying Zan had been the only one in hundreds of years from Great Xia who had succeeded. Jiang started looking down with a lost gaze and began to think. Even if he had talent like Ying Zan, not even Jiyu Kaishan had the ability to teach him the techniques of the 10,000 races of the abyss. Ying Zan was a descendant of the human emperor of Great Xia, and back then the emperor of humanity had led troops to counterattack the 10,000 races, capturing many of the beasts. Now things had changed since the martial god Jiang only focused on defending the entrance that connected to the realm of the 10,000 races. Jiyu Kaishan activated his power, causing the sword to shoot out like lightning. If our boy could obtain first place on the list of geniuses, he would try to use his authority to transfer some units from the capital. Upon hearing this, Jiang couldn't help but feel happy. Sometime later, night fell and Jiang Chen went to his apartment located in the city. He opened his palm, causing it to begin releasing Xiao Jia's energy. Jiang started observing this, and his eyes filled with joy, making a smile appear on his face. The journey to the ancient god's corpse had been very useful since his insects had eaten and grown significantly. That night, Little Nine's offspring and Xiao Jia's red beetles could reproduce again. At that moment, the ancestral tree of all things appeared behind our boy. Upon feeling this, he couldn't help but go into shock, and his eyes widened in surprise. He couldn't believe there was movement in his divine consciousness. In the tree, there was a new green fruit never seen before. Now that the ancestral tree of all things had borne fruit again, Jiang realized that the reason behind it was due to the increase in the number of insects. Jiang's eyes filled with surprise. He approached the tree and extended his hand. And the fruit began to fall into his palm. He was somewhat confused and surprised since he had never seen a green fruit before. The statistics window of the fruit appeared. It was a green lightning fruit. It could grant the user the opportunity to awaken the unique hidden profession known as Sovereign of Electricity, granting 3 abilities. The first one called Lightning Bolt, which allowed the user to transform into an electric current and teleport within the electrical field generated by themselves, ignoring obstacles. The current range of this electrical field was 50 meters. The second ability was called Ray Fusion, which allowed the user to absorb electrical energy and store it in their own cells to later release it in a fierce attack. The third and final ability was called Divine Judgment. The user's palm would transform into a source of electricity, instantly releasing an electric current. Upon seeing the statistics, a joyful smile spread across Jiang's face. With this fruit, he would be able to obtain a second profession and become a divine-level spiritual master with the power to manipulate electricity, becoming a job changer with dual class. While our boy was distracted thinking, the system informed him that the breeding of insects had been completed. The red beetle now had offspring of 30,000 hatchlings. And the 9 miasma wings now had offspring of 12 million hatchlings. Then, an explosion appeared behind him, causing the sky to fill with small beetles. Little Nine was furious. Now that Xiao Jia had reproduced, she gave him the order to leave. Jiang's body began to emit a powerful aura, making his eyes fill with excitement. He couldn't help but smile, realizing that this increase in power was thanks to Xiao Jia's new offspring. Jiang's statistics window appeared. He was level 36 and in the second transformation, with the title of Sovereign of Insects. His current professions were Divine-level Spiritual Breeder and Sovereign of Electricity. Our boy had 2 talent classes. The first class included Universal Growth, Divine Evolution, and Ancestral Tree of All Things. The second class included Hidden Lightning, Lightning Fusion, and Divine Judgment. Jiang's skills were Human Sword, Earthly Sword, Heavenly Sword, and Great Tao of the Sword. He also had 2 calamities, the Insect Mother Little Nine at level 36, with a progeny of 12 million insects, and Xiao Jia at level 32 with a progeny of 30,000 insects. His current strength was 409 points, his agility was 428 points, his energy was 379. His constitution was 498, and he had a combat evaluation of 41. 0 stars. The energy around his body became more intense. He clenched his fist and focused on the status window. Thanks to the reproduction of the insects, in addition to the sovereign of electricity. His combat strength had also increased, and thanks to the characteristics of the red armor beetle, his constitution had almost doubled compared to before. His eyes began to shine intensely. He punched the air, making electricity appear around his arm. He couldn't help but smile because even though in the prodigy competition he wouldn't be able to use Little Nine's power. With his new class and new abilities, he would be able to sweep through an area without much effort. And if all this didn't work, in the worst case scenario, he could use Seogea's power and unleash the dark demon. It was nighttime in the mountains of Keen Luo's war zone. In the depths of Kinling, there was a powerful blue dragon flying through the sky. Somewhere in the mountains, there was a group of men and a woman sitting. In front of them stood a large wooden table. The powerful dragon descended to the ground. And a black-haired man wearing a summer shirt got off the beast. The others were somewhat surprised to see that the man had arrived. With a forced smile, he asked them not to exaggerate since they were indeed punctual compared to him who had come all the way from Guanghai, mentioning that he was exhausted. The woman who had her eyes closed turned towards him, and with a cheerful smile mentioned that it was surprising to see someone from Guanghai dressed in this way. While everyone else wore formal clothes, the two of them were protectors of the country, so she didn't understand why there was such a difference between them. The grey-haired man sitting next to her began observing them and with a smile mocked her by saying that in this world, if they talked about sarcasm and oddities, she was number one. He didn't even bother to take a seat with the others. He sat on top of the dragon's body, turned towards them, and explained that people from Guanghai simply valued ostentation. Upon hearing this, they started arguing, but just then the muscular man forcefully struck the table and with an angry expression ordered them to stop and decided it was time to talk about the main matter. The long-haired man placed his hand on his shoulder, indicating that he should not lose his composure. Everyone remained silent. And the old man revealed that the competition of celestial geniuses had a different situation compared to last year. Besides the strongest region, which was the capital, there were also Madu in Jianganyong. Jianganyong not only had Jiang Wuxiang but also Jiang Chen had appeared, who possessed strength superior to the geniuses of Madu. The old man's eyes filled with seriousness, he began staring intently at the man and revealed that previously the war district of Jianganyong used to join forces with them to face Madu and the capital together, but this year they had no intention of allying with them. The grey-haired man intervened, began to observe the old man, and mentioned that his old friend Xiao Yuanshan had been inexplicably exiled to the underground abyss. With a cheerful smile, the woman extended her hand and asked if this year's plan was to join forces to eliminate Jianganyong first, since anyway, before the 6 war zones had united to confront the capital without gaining much advantage. Upon hearing this, the others thought Xing was right and that it was better to fight for second place than for first. The old man decided to hold a vote. Those in favor of joining forces could raise their hands. The grey-haired man raised his hand, saying that the Wuxing war zone was in favor. Xing from the Tianfu war zone also raised her hand. The muscular man from King Lan's 9th war zone also raised his hand. Everyone raised their hand except the man wearing the summer shirt. He was Yuanzhen Tian. The others asked why he was not in favor of joining forces. Yuanzhen Tian stuck his finger into his ear and his eyes filled with contempt and hatred. Asking if they had finished discussing, he began to gaze at the ground and with a smile revealed that this time he had not come to form an alliance with them. He approached them, slammed the table hard, and with a confident smile made it clear that this summer in the Darkseer Genius competition, the Guanghai War District was going to win. Everyone remained silent except for the grey-haired man, his attention fixed on Yuanzhen Tian. With an angry expression, he asked why he was talking nonsense. He mentioned again that his war district was going to win the Darkseer Genius competition. Saying these words felt very good to him. The eyes of the grey-haired man filled with rage, causing him to clench his fist tightly, crushing the glass. Xing opened her eyes and with a furious gaze began staring intently at Yuanzhen Tian. He decided it was time to leave and climbed onto the dragon. The dragon opened its mouth and started flying at great speed. Yuanjun Tian placed his arms behind his back and, with a smile, told them not to worry as he would no longer bother them nor inform anyone about this. The muscular man began gazing toward the table and asked the others if Yuanjun Tian had hit his head. The grey-haired man extended his hand, explaining that surely he had been kicked by a donkey or perhaps he had an ace up his sleeve they were unaware of. They decided to stop thinking about the matter. The old man grabbed the glass and his attention fixed on it. With a serious look, he mentioned that as long as they, the 4 great war zones, joined forces and formulated a perfect plan, Jinganan would soon be defeated. Somewhere in Kujang was the dangerous city of Wuxian. On top of the cliff were members of the Church of the Ancient God. While several men were prostrated, their leader, a man wearing a red cape, approached the cliff and began observing the city. He asked how things were going for the Divine Sun, questioning if they had discovered any unusual movements. One of his men told him not to worry since the great Divine Sun had successfully descended as the first genius of Guanghai's war district and had gained full trust and support from Yuanjun Tian, Guanghai's national protector. With the current strength of the great Divine Sun, he was bound to obtain first place in the ranking of geniuses. Upon hearing this, a smile spread across the leader's face since the supreme honor of Dahlia had been snatched from the Church of the Ancient God. He extended his hand towards the city. He wanted to see the expressions of the invincible protectors of the country. Now, the entire plan had already begun to take effect. All that remained was to wait for the competition for ranking among geniuses to begin, something that would attract everyone's attention in Dahlia. He extended his hands toward the sky, and his body began emitting an evil energy, revealing that at that moment, a beast tide was about to sweep through all of Kujang. Upon sensing this energy, all members of the cult clasped their hands together, saying that with Kujang's sacrifice, the ancient god would return. The next day, in Jinganan's war zone's central plaza, geniuses who were going to participate in the competition gathered. In front of them was a large screen and only one day remained before the competition commenced. Du Enfi, who had his arms behind his back, decided to repeat the rules he had mentioned before for those who did not remember them. Among the participants was our boy. With a curious gaze, he began to observe Du Enfi in silence. He had not been present in Jinganan, so he realized that he was going to repeat the rules for him. Du Enfi activated the screen and with a serious expression explained that in the competition of geniuses, there were a total of 8 great war zones, with 80 celestial geniuses. The competition was divided into 2 rounds. The first round was in teams. The small teams from the 8 great war zones entered a secret realm in Kim Yu's area to fight among themselves, eliminating 4 war zones with the fewest survivors. In this round, what was evaluated was teamwork, and no matter how strong one might be, if they could not protect their teammates they would lose. Everyone was somewhat surprised and started talking among themselves. Jiang remained calm and with a tranquil gaze started thinking. Du Enfi revealed that in the secret realm they were not going to be able to hide, since if someone stood still, they would be struck by lightning. Additionally, the range of the secret realm was going to shrink every hour and people outside the circle were going to be directly eliminated. Even though they died in the secret realm, they would be able to revive afterward. Jiang's eyes filled with excitement, causing a smile to spread across his face. If he stayed still, he would be struck by lightning, which was going to be perfect for using his new class and accumulating electricity. Thinking about this made his body start emitting thunder. One of the boys next to him couldn't help but feel somewhat surprised. The second round was an individual ranking battle. After the elimination from the first round, around 30 people were expected to remain in this round. Matches were going to take place. The rules were simple: whoever wins advances and whoever loses is eliminated. Du Enfi turned towards them and with a serious gaze asked them to choose the team captain. Everyone started talking among themselves and our boy felt that many gazes were going to focus on him. Just then, Liu Sandao and Mu Hengqiu appeared behind them and with a smile formed a heart with their arms, saying that they wanted Jiang to be the captain. Our boy couldn't help but feel somewhat embarrassed. He put his hand over his face and tried to pretend as if he didn't know who they were. Dao Jiang began to smile. He extended his hand to form a heart with his companion, saying that they also wanted Jiang to be the captain. His friend did not form the heart, he simply turned towards him, gave a thumbs up and with a sincere expression mentioned that he also agreed with the idea. Jiang couldn't help but feel somewhat confused, although deep down he knew he should feel happy. Bai Feng and Jiang Wuxiang were also present. With a calm gaze, Bai Feng explained that he and Tang Ying wanted Jiang Wuxiang to be the captain since although Jiang Cheng was very strong, after all, Jiang Wuxiang was more stable. Jiang Wuxiang's gaze fixed on our boy. He didn't know why everyone wanted him to be the captain. A girl who was next to Jiang mentioned that she also wanted Jiang to be the captain because he was very handsome. The blonde-haired man joined her. Jiang started touching his head with his hand and with a forced smile explained that he didn't know who they were. The woman placed her hand on her chest and with a tender expression introduced herself as Li Bing. The blue-haired boy began pointing to himself with his thumb and with a confident smile introduced himself as Prince. Jiang Wuxiang approached our boy, placed his hand on his shoulder and with a kind smile he also decided to vote for Jiang just to lighten the mood. Jiang snapped out of his trance, turned around and upon seeing this, he couldn't help but start sweating. He placed his hand on his chest, sighed, and explained that he didn't want to be the captain because he couldn't handle so much pressure. Everyone remained silent while on the other side Duanfeng got angry. With an enraged expression, he asked Jiang to stop acting in front of him since it would take him another 800 years to fool someone like him. Now that everyone trusted him, he had to do it well. Jiang took several steps back and his attention fixed on Duanfeng. He was somewhat surprised to see the reaction of this old man. Duanfeng extended his hand to one side and a staircase made of ice appeared. He began observing them, revealing that the Jinganan war zone had been intimidated for many years. This time changing their fate depended on them. This staircase led to the teleportation space. It was a gift for them. He wished them success in every way. The king of the celestial sword would be waiting for them above. He would act as the representative of the country, and would accompany them to the Keen Luo base. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, please subscribe our channel, like and share the video. Welcome to our channel.
Once the ancestral tree of all things appeared, Duanshu disappeared, releasing our boy's body. Jiang fell on his butt to the ground, and his attention fixed on the tree. He was confused since he didn't know why he was in the sea of consciousness. He remembered being possessed by the ancient god. Many questions came to his mind as he didn't know what was happening. The fruit began to shine intensely, catching Jiang's attention. He couldn't believe that the ancestral tree of all things was bearing fruit again. This fruit was different from the previous ones. Jiang stood up and started observing the fruit with a curious gaze. He knew that with the current level of the ancestral tree, it wasn't possible for it to bear colorful fruits. Then a system window appeared. Currently, the fruit wasn't ripe. It was a fruit formed by an extremely powerful divine soul as its embryo. It contained the source of divinity of that soul. For the fruit to mature successfully, he had to water it regularly with divine souls. Jiang put his hand under his chin and his eyes filled with joy, making a smile appear on his face, as this fruit contained the divine soul of the ancient god. Duanshu wanted to take over Jiang's body and did not expect the ancestral tree to form a fruit with his soul. Although the tree could not block the curse, it was still powerful when it came to divine souls and divine consciousness. The only bad thing about the fruit was that Jiang had to water it regularly with the divine souls of living beings, a condition too strict. While he was distracted, a familiar voice caught his attention, asking if he had awakened. Jiang came out of his trance and his mind filled with confusion, not knowing what was happening. Once our boy turned around, his eyes widened and surprised at what was in front of him. There was a powerful giant dragon with the shape of a six-eyed bat, and on top of its head sat Zhao Jia with a casual voice. He revealed to his father that he had managed to tame this monster. Jiang's attention fixed on the dragon, leaving him paralyzed with fear. Taming the dragon, Zhao Jia approached his father, began observing him, and asked if his new pet wasn't imposing. Jiang couldn't help but step back in shock, realizing that these creatures belonged to the sea of consciousness. He couldn't believe that little Jia was riding a 9 transformations creature. These were beings that not even the great Jialing who had been able to tame back then. Our boy stood speechless without knowing what was happening. The sky was filled with beetles, which had tamed the fiercest creatures of the Sea of Consciousness. Jiang was unable to believe that little Zhao Jia had been able to tame so many monsters. Placing his hand on the dragon's neck, Zhao Jia got off it, grabbed Jiang by the arm, and with a serious expression explained that this pet was very docile, and although little Nine wouldn't like it, he was sure his father would. He wanted him to ride the dragon. Jiang began observing Zhao Jia and couldn't help but go on alert, not knowing if little Zhao Jia really was capable of controlling the dragon. At the end, Zhao Jia convinced Jiang and both mounted on the head of the dragon. Despite our boy being somewhat scared, Zhao Jia placed both hands on its head and gave the order to fly. The powerful dragon raised its head, and Jiang explained that this monster was called Dark Demon, according to what he remembered. Eternal Hell had many of these monsters that were naturally forbidden by the human race. Calmly, Zhao Jia explained that one only needed to mark this beast and it could be used as a mount. Jiang was somewhat surprised since he knew that a 9 transformation monster would be very useful. The dragon spread its wings and prepared to fly. Just then, Zhao Jia's mind filled with confusion. He was not very sure if this thing could be taken outside. Jiang, who was behind him, mentioned that if they took the dragon out of the corpse, it would not take long before it was eliminated by the path of heaven. According to what he knew, this creature should only exist in the depths of eternal hell. He did not expect that it would also be born in the sea of consciousness of the ancient god. With a lost look, Jiang thought it was a shame since they could not expose this beast for too long. And although there wasn't much time left, at critical moments this beast could be very helpful. Jiang's eyes filled with surprise. He began to imagine a powerful serpent and remembered that there should still be 5 more monsters like the Dark Demon. He didn't know why he couldn't see them anywhere. Upon hearing this, little Zhao Jia couldn't help but get nervous and sweat. With a sincere expression, Zhao Jia revealed that he had eaten the other creatures. This left both the dragon and Jiang confused. He remembered that his son had filled his stomach with the heart of the ancient god. Little Zhao Jia casually responded that he was hungry since he had reproduced again. Jiang couldn't help but feel somewhat disappointed. He placed one hand over his face and rested the other on Zhao Jia's shoulder, thinking that he had done what needed to be done. He decided to leave this place to find peace. Zhao Jia began observing his father with a confused expression. Jiang got off the dragon and started crying, realizing that his son was only wasting fortune. He decided to look at things from a positive perspective. At least one monster was still alive. As a human being, he should be grateful. The attention of the dragon and Zhao Jia was fixed on Jiang. His son could not help but fall into confusion upon seeing his behavior. Just then, loud knocks began to be heard coming from the door. Jiang's gaze fixed on the door, realizing it was Gu Kaishan. The divine soul of the ancient god was sealed, and now that the dark demon had been captured, he knew that the outer defense would soon disappear. Sensing his master's energy, Jiang realized that the Jai family would also arrive soon. He turned to Zhao Jia and with a serene expression gave him the order to make the insects devour everything quickly and pack up what remained to take away. They needed to retreat soon, so he urged him to hurry. Zhao Jia began to observe his father in silence, not knowing why he was in such a hurry. He started touching his chin with his finger, and his eyes filled with sadness since he could no longer eat, asking if he could eat next time. Jiang refused, explaining that this was not a restaurant but the treasure of a god. Jiang's eyes filled with seriousness, he began to imagine Zai Xuanyu's powerful great-grandfather exuding an overwhelming energy. He knew that the reason Jai Lingku had not been able to become the god of the 9 transformations sword was not disconnected from the opportunities present in this place, realizing that if that person entered here and discovered what had happened, it would cause a great commotion. Using his power, little Zhao Jia began to drain and compress the food that the insects couldn't devour, turning it into a ball of water. The only bad thing was that he couldn't store it. Jiang turned around and told him not to worry since his sister was going to take care of that. Little Nine manifested herself, and upon seeing this, her eyes filled with fury, making her sweat. In front of her was a pile of giant balls made of water. She put her hands on her hips and her attention fixed on them. For her, these balls were nothing more than foul-smelling dung. She could no longer tolerate her brother because he wouldn't stop causing problems. With a smile, Jiang began flying toward the exit. Now that Little Nine had cleaned up all the mess, it was time to return and call the master. Outside the tomb, Gu Kaisin attacked again and this time cut the corpse's wall, creating an opening. He began to observe carefully and mentioned that the wound was not healing. Upon hearing this, Jia Lingku's attention focused on the wound. He couldn't help but be surprised to see that not only had the defense of the ancient god's corpse weakened, but it even seemed like it was about to disappear. The gaze of Gu Kaisin, who had his arms crossed, filled with joy. He wanted to go in and save Jia Lingku's eyes widened with curiosity. He was suspicious and wanted to go in as well to see what had happened. Just before they could act, Jiang Chen appeared flying. He reached out his hand towards his master and with a desperate expression asked him to take him along. Gu Kaisin and Jia Lingku began observing him silently, not knowing what was happening. Once Jiang came out of the corpse, Kai Xuanyu came running and gave him a strong hug. She couldn't help but cry and feel relieved to see that he was okay. The eyes of our boy widened in surprise. Despite feeling relieved, he knew this was not the moment. Gu Kaisin, who was next to him, couldn't help but feel an inner peace upon seeing that Jiang was fine. Quickly, Jiang pushed her aside with his hand and with a furious expression gave her the order to leave since there was no time. Upon seeing this, Kai Xuanyu's eyes filled with tears and her mind was full of confusion. She did not know what was happening to Jiang and why he said there was no time. Jiang approached Gu Kaisin and with a serious gaze explained to his master that if they did not leave this place quickly, they were going to die. Upon hearing this, his attention focused on him and he could not help but go on alert, without knowing why Jiang was so serious. Despite being unsure, he decided to trust his disciple. Both mounted on the blade of his sword. Using his fingers he began to control his sword, making it shoot out like lightning. He said goodbye to them, explaining that he no longer wanted to stay in this place. Seeing this, Kai Xuanyu couldn't help but feel sad, thinking that Jiang hated her, while on the other hand her father was furious. He started shouting, thinking that he had given the divine and demonic blood in vain to someone who didn't understand how to take care of a lady. Kai Xuanyu clenched her fists, approached her father and with a furious look asked how he could insult Jiang, reminding him that Jiang had risked his life to save her. The father closed his eyes, put his hand behind his head, and couldn't help but feel somewhat embarrassed, thinking that if Jiang had risked his life for his daughter, it meant she was important to him. She placed her hands over her mouth and couldn't help but blush at the thought of Jiang. Her eyes filled with tears as she realized that to Jiang she was important and he was afraid this might affect her performance during the competition of the prodigies of heaven. For this reason, he had risked his life. She placed her hands on her hips and filled herself with determination, vowing not to disappoint Jiang in the fight for the list of prodigies, promising to show her best version. Upon seeing this, the father couldn't help but feel happy. Not far from them was Jialinkyu, his attention fixed on the tomb of the ancient god. He felt suspicious and knew that Jiang Chen's reaction had not been natural, thinking it would be better to go and to see what had happened. He began to carefully observe the interior of the corpse, and it didn't take long for him to realize that all the treasure had disappeared. He remembered that before there were a lot of monsters in the sea of consciousness of the corpse, but now there wasn't a single one left. He put his hand on top of his head, closed his eyes, and started imagining Jiang and Gu Kaisin fleeing on the sword. He knew Jiang was guilty since he was eager to leave. He was furious because Jiang hadn't left even a single monster for him. When Jialinkyu had entered the corpse, he had faced the 5 powerful beasts. Not even he knew how Jiang had been able to escape from the level 9 monsters, something that had even been complicated for someone as strong as him. He entered the corpse and began to inspect the veins carefully. He knew that Jiang was not someone simple. Despite our boy having left him a bitter future, he was willing to accept it. But what Jiang did not know is that he had completely underestimated his power. While the master and disciple were riding on the sword, Gu Kaishan turned around and asked if Jiang had really emptied the sword god's treasure. Our boy put his hand behind his head and replied yes. Gu Kaishan could not help but feel somewhat disappointed, not knowing what kind of dog disciples he had accepted. He had always been honest and obedient, but his disciples were something else. The first had proclaimed himself as the king of the bloody knife back then, causing total chaos in the Qinglin war zone. The second had stolen the National Guardian's fiancée, and now the third was even harder for him to describe. With a cheerful expression, Jiang extended his hands and recalled that only 3 days remained before the prodigy ranking competition began, asking if he believed that with his current power he could win in a battle against Jiang Huashuang and Jia Xuanyu. Gu Kaishan turned around and began observing him silently without responding. He explained that this time it seemed like he would not have many problems if he fought against Jia Xuanyu. He had heard that these days in Magic City Jiang Huashuang had also progressed greatly, and his 8-armed god of war body was something not to be underestimated. Somewhere else was Inzhan training on the Red Lake that he was not only the first celestial genius of Jiang's generation, but also his talent was considered the best in 800 years of Daji. While Inzhan's body was surrounded by a powerful energy, he began to gaze at his hand with a piercing expression. Generally, job changers reach spiritual maturity at 18 years old to be able to activate a professional class, but Inzhan was different. He had activated his professional class at 3 years old, obtaining recognition from the divine weapon. The human emperor's sword, at 9 years old, next to him were several powerful red dragons. At 12 years old, he had entered a forbidden zone and returned at 15. During these last 3 years, he had been training in seclusion in the military region of the capital. Jiang knew that Inzhan had awakened a class very early, but he didn't know why his current level barely reached the 3 transformations. Gu Kaishan explained that this was because, in addition to the system, he also cultivated the supreme techniques of all celestial races, leaving our boy in shock. Using his hand, Inzhan wiped his chin, his eyes filled with curiosity. His body of murderous blood was about to be completed and he wanted to know if there was news about Jiang Qin. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, then don't forget to subscribe and like the video.